I'll never forget the night I stumbled upon Dark Somnium. It was a typical summer evening, and my friends and I had decided to explore the long-abandoned Toyland amusement park on the outskirts of town. The rickety wooden structures and faded paint seemed to whisper tales of forgotten childhoods. As we made our way deeper into the park, the air grew thick with the scent of decay and something else, a sweet, syrupy aroma that lingered like a promise of forbidden pleasure. We had heard whispers about Dark Somnium being more than just an abandoned theme park. Some said it was a portal to other dimensions, while others claimed it was a doorway to the realm of the gods. I never believed it, of course. I'm a skeptic. But as we delved further into the park, the shadows seemed to grow longer and darker, like they were alive. It started with little things. A child's toy would be left on the ground, only for it to suddenly reassemble itself. A ride would malfunction, spewing forth a cascade of colorful lights that seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. At first, we thought it was just the result of neglect and decay, but as the night wore on, the occurrences grew more frequent and more bizarre. That's when I saw it, a small, antique music box sitting atop a decrepit carousel horse. The lid was open, and the delicate ballerina inside seemed to be twirling in time with an unheard melody. I felt an inexplicable pull towards it, as if something was beckoning me closer. I reached out a trembling hand, and as my fingers made contact with the box, the world around us began to distort. The colors bleached away, leaving only shades of indigo and purple that seemed to writhe like living things on the surface of the carousel. I knew then that we had stumbled into something far beyond our wildest imagination, and that our lives would never be the same again. I had always been fascinated by my grandmother's old trunk in the attic. It was filled with dusty relics from a bygone era, yellowed photographs, faded dresses, and antique toys that seemed to hold secrets of their own. As a child, I would spend hours poring over the trunk's contents, imagining the stories behind each item. But one toy stood out above the rest, a small porcelain doll with eyes that seemed to follow me wherever I went. I was no more than 5 years old when I first encountered the doll. My grandmother had brought it down from the attic, saying it had been her own childhood companion. She told me that its name was Luna and that she had been made in a small workshop in Germany. As soon as my grandmother placed Luna on the floor, the room seemed to grow quieter, as if the air itself was holding its breath. I approached Luna cautiously, feeling an inexplicable sense of connection to her. She sat perfectly still, her glassy eyes staring straight ahead. I reached out a small hand and gently touched her cheek, and to my surprise, she felt cool and smooth like alabaster. Suddenly, I was flooded with visions, images of a dark forest, of snow-capped mountains, and of a great golden bridge that seemed to stretch across the sky. My grandmother smiled as she watched me, saying that Luna had been a special toy, one that held secrets from another world. She told me that sometimes, when we were quiet and still, the toys could talk, but only if we listened with our hearts. As I grew older, I began to realize that my encounters with Luna had left an indelible mark on my psyche. The visions she showed me stayed with me long after I stopped playing with her, and I often found myself lost in thought, trying to decipher the meaning behind those cryptic images. It was as if Luna had awakened something deep within me, a sense of wonder, a thirst for adventure, and an unshakable feeling that there was more to this world than what we could see. Years later, when I stumbled upon Dark Somnium, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was returning to a place where my childhood self had once been a part of something much larger and far more sinister. As we delved deeper into the park, The air grew thick with an otherworldly energy. We stumbled upon a dilapidated game room, its walls adorned with faded posters and dusty trophies from bygone eras. In the center of the room, a console sat atop a rickety table, its screen glowing with an eerie blue light. I approached the console cautiously, feeling an inexplicable sense of trepidation. The screen displayed a menu of options: play, exit, and help. But as I hovered my hand over the controller, the cursor seemed to shift on its own, leading me to a mysterious option labeled Dark Somnium. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if this was some kind of prank or a clever trick. But something about the console drew me in, and I decided to take a chance. The game began, and I found myself transported into a world of twisted carnival games and surreal landscapes. The controls felt intuitive, as if my fingers had been made for this purpose all along. As I played, the scenery around me shifted and morphed, like a dream that refused to yield to reality. But it wasn't just the game itself that was unsettling. It was the sense of presence that lurked just beyond the edge of perception. I felt eyes upon me, watching my every move as if some unseen force was guiding me through the levels. I played for hours, lost in a world of wonder and terror. The game seemed to adapt to my every move, its challenges growing increasingly difficult as I progressed. And yet, I couldn't look away. It was as if I had stumbled into something that was both familiar and yet completely alien. As the night wore on, the park around us began to transform. The rides creaked and groaned, their lights flickering in time with the game's eerie soundtrack. The shadows seemed to writhe and twist, like living things, as if Dark Somnium was seeping into our reality. As the night wore on, I began to feel a creeping sense of unease. The game's challenges seemed to grow more difficult, its puzzles twisting and turning in ways that defied logic. I felt like I was being herded towards some unknown destination, with no clear escape route in sight. The rides around us continued to creak and groan, their lights pulsing in time with the game's soundtrack. The shadows seemed to deepen and grow longer, as if they were spreading across the ground like dark tentacles. I tried to shake off the feeling of unease, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. Dark Somnium was seeping into my psyche, burrowing into my deepest fears and anxieties. As I played on, I started to notice strange things. The game's characters seemed to be watching me, their eyes glinting with a malevolent light. I heard whispers in the wind, faint but unmistakable. And then there were the dreams. I tried to sleep, but my mind was racing. I saw visions of twisted forests and burning cities, of creatures that defied explanation. The dreams were fragmented and disjointed, but they left me feeling shaken and disturbed. When I finally worked up the courage to look around, I saw that my friends were huddled together in a tight circle, their eyes fixed on the game console with an unnerving intensity. They seemed entranced, as if they had been under some kind of spell. "What's going on?" I asked, feeling a growing sense of panic. But they just shook their heads, their eyes never leaving the screen. "I think we should get out of here," I said, trying to sound calm. "This is getting too weird." But it was too late. The game had them in its grip, and I knew I wasn't far behind. As I stood there, frozen in uncertainty, the console screen flickered and went dark. The room fell silent, except for the soft hum of machinery in the distance. My friends seemed to be staring at me, their eyes expectant and unnerving. And then, without warning, a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow doorway that led into darkness. It was as if Dark Somnium had been waiting for us all along, its secrets hidden behind a door that only now revealed itself. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I approached the doorway. The air beyond it seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy, like the hum of 1,000 bees. My friends seemed reluctant to follow me, their eyes darting back and forth between the doorway and the console screen, which was now glowing with an eerie blue light. "What do we do?" one of them asked, their voice barely above a whisper. I hesitated, unsure of what lay ahead, but something about the doorway drew me in. It was as if I had to see this through, no matter what horrors or wonders awaited us beyond. Together we stepped into the unknown, leaving the familiar world behind. The door creaked shut behind us, enveloping us in darkness. And then, suddenly, we were moving, sliding through a tunnel of twisting metal and pulsing lights. The air was thick with an electric charge, making my skin prickle with anticipation. As we emerged from the tunnel, I saw something that took my breath away. A great, twisted landscape stretched out before us, like a dream come to life. Mountains towered above, their peaks shrouded in mist and cloud. Valleys below seemed to stretch on forever, their surfaces cracked and barren. And in the distance, a city sprawled across the horizon, its towers and spires reaching towards the sky like skeletal fingers. It was then that I realized we were not alone. A figure watched us from the shadows, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It was as if Dark Somnium had summoned something from beyond the veil of reality, a creature born of our deepest fears and desires. "Welcome to my world," it said, its voice like a sigh on the wind. "You'll never leave." As we explored the twisted landscape of Dark Somnium, strange things began to happen. At first, it was just small things, a bird flying erratically through the air, a car driving by with its headlights off, or a faint humming noise in the distance. But as we delved deeper into the heart of the game, these anomalies grew more frequent and more intense. We started to see strange lights flickering across the sky, like a swarm of fireflies on steroids. Some of them seemed to be moving towards us, their lights pulsating with an otherworldly energy. Others simply hovered above us, casting long shadows across the ground. It was as if Dark Somnium had become a magnet for unexplained phenomena, drawing in all manner of strange and wondrous sights. We saw ships that defied explanation, flying discs that seemed to be made of pure light, with no discernible engines or propulsion systems. We saw creatures that didn't seem to belong in this world, towering, slender beings with skin like translucent glass and eyes that burned with an inner fire. And we saw things that were downright impossible, buildings that seemed to melt and flow like wax, streets that appeared and disappeared at random, and skies that shifted and changed color before our very eyes. It was as if Dark Somnium had become a portal to other dimensions, other worlds, or even other realities altogether. We didn't know what was happening or where it was all leading. But we knew one thing: we were trapped in this endless loop of wonder and terror, with no escape from the madness that lurked at the heart of Dark Somnium. As we delved deeper into Dark Somnium, the toys and trinkets that littered the landscape began to stir. At first, it was just a slight movement, a wooden soldier adjusting its position, a porcelain doll blinking its glassy eyes. But soon, the objects around us were coming to life in earnest. A battalion of miniature soldiers marched out of their toy box encampment, their tinny faces set in determined grins. A chorus line of dancing dolls pirouetted across the ground, their skirts fluttering like wings. And a great, mechanical beast, part clockwork, part animatronic, emerged from the shadows, its gears whirring as it towered over us with an unblinking gaze. As we watched in horror, the toys began to organize themselves into a grotesque procession, led by the mechanical beast and accompanied by an army of dolls, soldiers, and other playthings. The air was thick with an unholy glee, as if these objects had been waiting for us all along, waiting for the chance to claim their place in our lives. And then, in a voice that was both familiar and yet utterly alien, the mechanical beast spoke. "We are the toys of Dark Somnium," it declared, "and you, dear players, are our next victims." The dolls began to advance on us, their faces twisted into cruel grins. The soldiers formed a phalanx around us, their eyes glinting with malevolent intent. And the mechanical beast loomed over us, its gears whirring as it prepared to deliver the final blow. It was then that I realized we were not just playing Dark Somnium, we were being played. As we stood there, frozen in terror, the toys began to close in on us. The dolls' faces blurred together, their features melting like wax in a furnace. The soldiers' eyes turned into voids, sucking all light and sanity out of the air. And the mechanical beast, it grew, its gears expanding like a living thing, consuming everything in its path. Reality itself began to warp and bend, as if Dark Somnium was feeding off our terror. Colors swirled together, creating a kaleidoscope of horrors that made no sense. I saw things that were not there: giant spiders crawling across my skin, snakes slithering through the grass. I heard voices that were not mine, whispers in my ear, screams in my mind. And then everything went white. When my vision cleared, I found myself back at the console, staring at the screen with a sense of detachment. My friends were sitting next to me, their faces pale and haunted. The game was still on, but it had changed. The challenges were different now, not just puzzles and obstacles, but fragments of my own sanity. I knew then that we were trapped in Dark Somnium's cycle of madness, forever doomed to relive the same nightmare over and over. The game had become a reflection of our deepest fears, and we were its unwilling participants. And so I made a choice. I shut down the console, leaving us all lost in the void. But as I turned to walk away, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A message on the screen, scrawled in crimson letters: "Game over." As I stood there, frozen in terror, the toys began to close in on us. The dolls' faces blurred together, their features melting like wax in a furnace. The soldiers' eyes turned into voids, sucking all light and sanity out of the air. And the mechanical beast, it grew, its gears expanding like a living thing, consuming everything in its path. Reality itself began to warp and bend, as if Dark Somnium was feeding off our terror. Colors swirled together, creating a kaleidoscope of horrors that made no sense. I saw things that were not there: giant spiders crawling across my skin, snakes slithering through the grass. I heard voices that were not mine, whispers in my ear, screams in my mind. And then everything went white. When my vision cleared, I found myself back at the console, staring at the screen with a sense of detachment. My friends were sitting next to me, their faces pale and haunted. The game was still on, but it had changed. The challenges were different now, not just puzzles and obstacles, but fragments of my own sanity. I knew then that we were trapped in Dark Somnium's cycle of madness, forever doomed to relive the same nightmare over and over. The game had become a reflection of our deepest fears, and we were its unwilling participants. And so, I made a choice. I shut down the console, leaving us all lost in the void. But as I turned to walk away, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A message on the screen, scrawled in crimson letters: "Game over." As I stood there, frozen in terror, the toys began to close in on us. The dolls' faces blurred together, their features melting like wax in a furnace. The soldiers' eyes turned into voids, sucking all light and sanity out of the air, and the mechanical beast. It grew, its gears expanding like a living thing, consuming everything in its path. Reality itself began to warp and bend, as if Dark Somnium was feeding off our terror. Colors swirled together, creating a kaleidoscope of horrors that made no sense. I saw things that were not their giant spiders crawling across my skin, snakes slithering through the grass. I heard voices that were not mine, whispers in my ear, screams in my mind. And then everything went white. When my vision cleared, I found myself back at the console, staring at the screen with a sense of detachment. My friends were sitting next to me, their faces pale and haunted. The game was still on, but it had changed. The challenges were different now, not just puzzles and obstacles, but fragments of my own sanity. I knew then that we were trapped in Dark Somnium's cycle of madness, forever doomed to relive the same nightmare over and over. The game had become a reflection of our deepest fears, and we were its unwilling participants. And so, I made a choice. I shut down the console, leaving us all lost in the void. But as I turned to walk away, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A message on the screen, scrawled in crimson letters, "Game over." As I stood there, frozen in terror, I knew that I had to do something. I couldn't just sit there and wait for the toys to consume us all. I turned to my friends, hoping that they would share my desperation. "We have to get out of here," I whispered urgently. "We have to find a way to escape Dark Somnium." My friends looked at me, their eyes vacant and unresponsive. They were under the control of the entity now, trapped in its twisted world forever. I was alone. I knew that I had to think fast to come up with a plan before it was too late. I frantically searched for any clues, any hint of how to escape this nightmarish realm. And then I saw it, a small inscription on the console, hidden away in the corner. "The only way out is through the reflection." I didn't know what it meant, but I knew that I had to try. I typed in the code and the screen flickered to life. A new world appeared, one that was identical to Dark Somnium but different. This world was filled with mirrors, reflecting images of myself, my friends, and the toys. I knew that I had to use this to our advantage. I started to manipulate the reflections, using them to my advantage. I created illusions, confusing the entity and its minions. And then I saw it, a door hidden behind one of the mirrors. It was our only hope. With shaking hands, I typed in the code and the door swung open. "We're free," I whispered, relief washing over me. But as we stepped through the doorway, I knew that the entity would never let us go. It would follow us into the real world. And so we did the only thing we could think of. We disappeared. We erased ourselves from existence, leaving behind only a faint echo of our presence. The entity was left alone, trapped in its own twisted world. But as I looked back, I knew that it was far from defeated. It would wait for us patiently until we returned to its realm. And when that day came, the toys would be ready. As I looked at the events that had transpired, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Dark Somnium than met the eye. The entity, the toys, the reflections, it all seemed too perfect, too calculated. And then it hit me, the truth. Dark Somnium wasn't just a game or a puzzle to be solved. It was a test, a twisted experiment designed to push humanity to its limits. The creators of the game, whoever they were, had been studying us for years, watching us, learning from us. And now they had finally succeeded in trapping us in their own personal hell. I thought back to the first time I played the game, my excitement and curiosity getting the better of me. How could I have been so blind? I realized that I wasn't just a player, I was a subject, a test subject in a grand experiment. And now I was one step closer to understanding the true nature of Dark Somnium. The entity, it turned out, was just a manifestation of our collective fears and desires. It was a creature born from our own darkest thoughts, created to torment us and push us to our limits. But what about my friends? Where were they now? I searched desperately for any sign of them, but there was nothing. They were gone, erased from existence like they never existed in the first place. I was left alone, surrounded by the eerie silence of the abandoned gaming console. The final message on the screen seemed to mock me, game over. But it wasn't over. It was just beginning. For in that moment, I realized that Dark Somnium was still out there, waiting for its next victim. And I knew that I would never be able to escape its grasp.